speaker, obviously you can take yourselves off video, like please do have a snack and stuff. It's will be us talking mainly, so feel free to hide yourselves or show yourselves, that's fine as well, but either or is fine. Okay, so we're bang on 11, so let's get started. Let me just check the desk. Okay. So welcome everyone. So I'll just start on time because we've got a lot to cover. So thanks for joining today. So welcome to our session from AI and Agency. So that's a company that I run, which is obviously supporting agencies to use AI more effectively and adopt it in a way that works much better for their agency. And today we're really focused on, if you couldn't tell by the title, we're focused on really shadow AI, basically. So the title of our session is Most Agencies Are Using AI in Client Work Without Telling Clients. This came from something that I've been seeing a lot with agencies. So agency hasn't really been put into agencies through a strategic approach. It hasn't been a top-down decision for people. It's arrived through people experimenting and tools coming in via a lot of different ways in the agency. So some people might start using ChatGPT or Claude. Someone might run through campaign data through a tool to get quicker insights. Someone might start generating images or summaries or automating parts of reporting. And none of those decisions feel like a big deal on their own. They feel very helpful for the individual. Obviously, their manager might be grateful that they're doing something more efficiently and more effectively. But when you zoom out and look across the agency, those all individual elements start to add up very quickly, which means that AI is now influencing client work, creative production, data analysis, internal decisions, and even how teams think about their work. And in a lot of agencies, leadership doesn't have a clear view of where or how that's happening. This is what we call shadow AI. Just to be clear, this isn't something people are doing maliciously. And it's not even that people are kind of doing it on purpose. It's just the natural result of smart people trying to make their work faster by using tools that we have available now. So actually it's through the kind of agency people we try and recruit that we really want to give them the autonomy to be able to create the outputs in their own way. But there is a sense of risk with an agency not understanding all the methods that are being used. So what that means is that AI is now touching client data, creative outputs, and strategy without a clear oversight, often by the agency. And clients are also starting to notice this. So we're seeing this come through in vendor onboarding, procurement processes, data handling policies. I've actually just come off a call this morning with someone who has a big RFP to do, looking at exactly this. They've been asking a lot of detail about where they're using AI in their processes, and we had a call because they were struggling to answer. So where agencies are being asked things like, are you using AI in client work? What tools are involved and where does our data go? A lot of agencies don't actually have a clear answer yet. So today isn't talking about tools really at all, not about prompts. It's about where agencies are actually exposed, what responsible AI actually looks like in practice, and how you can take control of this without slowing your team down. So what I would like to do is obviously introduce our speakers today. So we have some really great panelists on speaking about a few areas very relevant to this topic today. So if I can hand over to you, Rohit, to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I am Rohit. I am the founder of Pattern Data, and I run AI audits for professional services businesses, highlighting where the risk and sort of focusing on making sure professional service businesses are sort of compliant with the governance, and then also being a fractional AI lead to give them the insights as to where they can use AI and automation within their business.
Thank you very much. And Vidya?
Hi everyone, I'm Vidya Palaram, and I'm an independent AI governance lead So my role basically is to work with organizations to help find the risks and the opportunities, understand the any potential harms, and put processes in place so that any AI that is deployed or tools that are being used are done safely, lawfully, ethically, fairly. So if anything were to go wrong, that's been thought of beforehand.
Thank you. And last but not least, Michael.
Right, just checking. I'm off mute, Emily.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Excellent. Good morning, everyone. Michael McDonald here. I'm from Brains Before Bots. Essentially, we offer fractional AI leadership for UK agencies. Essentially, I've come at this from the inside. I'm a former agency owner. I co-owned 2 agencies for 15 years. And during that that period of time, there was a major crisis that hit. And essentially, one agency survived, the other didn't. And looking back at the one that survived and the one that didn't, it was very clear what the difference was. And the difference was governance. And I know that's normally quite a boring, horrible word, but once you've got those structures in place, you don't realize just how robust your business becomes. So essentially, I'm bringing that scar tissue into this space now, helping agencies operationalize this, because essentially, at the end of the day, it's governance. If it's not operational, it's not going to support your business. So it's all about how do we create an operational governance for this transition we're in as agencies.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got a few kind of themes that we're going to cover today. The first one we're going to talk about is a bit of a reality check. So what is actually happening inside agencies? So let's start with that. Because this isn't theoretical. AI adoption agencies is already happening. As we all know, it's not something that agencies are thinking about whether they should do. It's happening. It's just not always as visible or as clear as you would expect. And in most cases, it's happening from the bottom up, not the top down. So Rohit, when you audit AI and automation inside real organizations, when you go into companies, where does shadow AI usually show up first?
So most of the time, shadow AI comes from someone trying to do what they're doing a little bit quicker, because their process is sort of set up in a way where it takes them a lot more time. So often they would use a free version of ChatGPT, free version of Claude, and use that as part of the process. Maybe it's just drafting an email because they don't know how to word something, or they need to do some quick analysis on a bit of data, and they think that that'll be an easy way of looking at that. But then that it's them trying to do what they're doing a lot quicker, and then you sort of get a little bit of a cottage industry between different departments who are either using one version of a free model of like ChatGPT or Claude or Grok or wherever, and then it sort of results in a bit of a mix of, one, they're not actually fluent in how to be able to use the tools because they're just experimenting. So there's a lot of difference between what they're producing, but then as well you get a lot of generic outputs. So I'm sure everyone's seen on LinkedIn, there's a rise of very, very generic LinkedIn posts or Instagram posts, which just don't read well. They follow a structure, but they're just, you can sort of tell that they're not written very well, because ultimately that they haven't been worked and prompted or had the different sort of way of speaking that those people should have. And so like most of the time for a founder, that risk is the voice of their clients in this case becomes very, very generic, and loses a lot of the impact that you would normally get, because the way that they're using it isn't set up properly to be used for a client. Because I mean, these tools can be used. It's just, if they're not set up right, then you'll have rather generic information. And then, you've got the risk of, because you're using free tools, you are the product. So, that data, once it's there, can be used by that model to train it even more. And if someone is clever enough to prompt ChatGPT or whichever model in a way, they can easily access that proprietary data that you've put in there, whether that's, you know, secret information about a client's new product that they're getting ready to release, or whether actual proper company data and the sort of techniques that your agency actually uses to pitch and develop more client work.
Thank you. And I think it's a good point that often what's happening at the moment is team members are using it at very different levels. And actually, like prior to AI, with my operations hat on, companies invest a lot into rolling out new systems and training their teams and obsessing about whether they all know how to use ClearCup or Monday, and they put a lot of money into making sure that the teams are trained and know how to use these things, whereas AI has kind of sneaked in and leadership aren't putting the importance on getting people to use it at the same level that they expect, but they haven't put any thought behind how they should be using it in the same way as kind of prior rollout of systems. Rohit, I don't know if you've seen like any examples of that.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes down to a founder or an owner will probably they've heard about AI and they'll be like, well, we want to use AI, but not they don't define how they want to use it or where they sort of know all the little things where it can help. I mean, a lot of the cases when we talk to people is they want to use AI for lots of different things, but in reality, some of those things are just simple automations. You don't even need AI for them as part of that process. And so it's sort of AI and automation have sort of been bashed together in a way, thinking that, you know, the concept of AI will be able to do everything, and it's just magic in it. That's how it will do it. So if it's for like a leadership point, it's being able to sort of look at AI as an extra tool alongside automation in that sort of operational hat, and say, right, what's going on with our processes? Where are all of the stopgaps that are causing us extra time? And then look at us, okay, we can refine the process and then fit it in there, rather than just going with, we'll do AI, and then they get a junior person to start looking into it. But and to be honest, this is the sort of same thing that happened with the sort of digital transformation age as well, where businesses are like, we need to get a handle of our data, we need to know what to use with our data. And then a poor little data analyst graduate was given the task and ended up in a massive mess of Excel spreadsheets and data all over the shop. And this is the sort of same case where it just needs that bit of structure to be able to know where and when to use it.
Thank you very much. Okay, Michael, from your side, especially working with agencies and procurement processes, when agencies are pitching or filling out vendor questionnaires, what kind of AI questions are clients starting to ask, and why do agencies tend to get caught off guard by this?
Right. So I think, yeah, obviously, in terms of the questions, that this is going to continue to evolve over time. So I think we just have to appreciate that where we are now and where we're going to be in a very short period of time, I think will expand quite quickly. But really, the client questions at this stage, to my mind, are falling into three categories. So number one is tool disclosure. Are you clear on what tools you're using inside your business? Secondly, would be data handling. I think one of the advantages that UK agencies have got across some other markets in the world is that GDPR came in the last, roughly decade. So I think in terms of that data handling component as a leader inside the business, that's something that you're probably a little bit more comfortable with, but data handling is definitely one of the questions that's coming up in those questionnaires. Exactly the level of comfort the client's looking for is, if my data is going anywhere near this technology, how's it getting used and what data is getting used? And I think those guardrails are really, really critical for the team to understand as well. And I think to Rohit's point a little bit earlier, people working at different levels with these tools, I think that translates into data as well. You know, somebody that might be a bit more strategic versus somebody a bit more creative, they might be a little bit more loose or a little bit more strict on what they drop into the AI prompt. So that's something you've definitely got to, you know, make more uniform across the business. And then the critical, almost obvious one is accountability. And that's that, you know, at the end of the day, you can be a really good prompter, you can use the right data, but are we just blindly accepting what comes out of the AI, or have we got a very clear accountability line? And I cover off an interesting case study in chapter 1 of the book here, where it was Canada Airlines actually ended up putting a chatbot in place online. And I'm not going to have time to go through the full story, but the short version is they gave the clients, the customer online, the incorrect advice, and they didn't want to pay the fine. So they took it to court. And their defense was, it wasn't us, it was the AI chatbot. And obviously that got thrown out of court. You know, the Canadian court said, no, it's your chatbot, it's your business. You can't tell us that the chatbot's a separate legal entity, because that's the route they took. So the learning we can take out of the case study is exciting technology. It can do a lot of incredible things for our businesses and grow them more quickly and enable us to do a lot more things that we weren't able to do before within production budgets. But the critical thing is accountability. Have you got things set up in such a way that there's definitely somebody that is going to be asked the question if there's anything wrong with any content that's being created, for example, or any referencing that's been done if you're working in a healthcare communication space? So I think those are the sort of 3 areas to sort of summarize this. Tool disclosure, do you know what tools you're using? Data, what data is going in? And then give us a level of comfort that there's human accountability in your process inside your business. I'd say those are the key ones.
Thank you. And actually, so the client that I spoke to this morning, who was doing an RFP about this, actually what they were being asked was kind of a step further, was how are you going to support us with our AI adoption? Because you should be the ones that are very knowledgeable about this. So you need to support us with how we're going to roll out AI adoption within our marketing. So it's also, as well as the kind of risk and governance side, it's also how you are competitive as an agency, which clients will start to expect you to be, because they will expect agencies to be at the forefront of this as well.
Absolutely. And if I can just add a point onto that, I cover this where I talk about the prompt dividend. I think one of the key things here is that when you've got these champions that are emerging from the bottom up inside your agency business, some of them get really, really good. And if they get really, really good and you're not capturing that value that's getting created inside of your business, you're going to fall into the sea of sameness. And what I mean by that is not necessarily just you're going to produce better work than your competitors. It's more about, one of the conversations that I find coming through a lot of discussions I'm having is advertisers are starting to ask the question of agencies saying, okay, if this job took you 30 hours to do, and now with AI, you can do it in 5, why are you billing me the same? And I think one of the opportunities in this part of the conversation we're having now is really formalizing some internal processes to capture that value. Because at the end of the day, the way you're going to be able to defend your margins, which are under pressure, everyone's feeling the pressure. Everyone's saying, "Whoa, money's tight. Bring your prices down." The way you're going to defend that is to say, "No, my team is not going to ChatGPT or Claude and dropping in one prompt. We have a very defined workflow for a very specific reason to give you the quality of work that you expect from our agency." So yes, we can do a lot more and differently, but there's a lot of very, very critical internal operational governance we have in place, which will guarantee you high quality work. So the point I'm making is, to protect your margin, you need to capture this value in terms of internal operational governance processes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you. Okay, so to Vidya, from a governance perspective, why is it risky when organizations assume tools like ChatGPT or Copilot are low risk by default? What are they misunderstanding about how these systems actually work?
I mean, the first question there is, why do you assume that they're low risk. And one of the key points with governance is with governance is to document your processes and document your assumptions. So with these tools, the tool itself isn't necessarily the problem, it's the impact and how you use the tool. So if you're using the tool maybe as a critical friend to test ideas, that could be seen as low risk. But if you're uploading client data, potentially sensitive data, if your output is a marketing campaign that could influence the public, then that then potentially becomes high risk. So it's not necessarily the tool, it's how you use the tool. So that's the first question. That's the first point. And as part of your governance process, it's really important that things are documented. So governance will look at things top up, and the challenge we have with shadow AI is it's coming bottom up. So leaders really ought to be looking at what are our goals and values of our organization? How do we serve our clients? And how can we use AI to either solve pain points within the organizations or help us enhance our existing value proposition? And that's the bit that's missing. So when you look at it from that lens, you then look at every aspect of your business, your relationship with your clients, and then you work through a systematic process, which what governance is. It's asking sensible questions, including what are the opportunities, what could go wrong. And then, as Michael said at the top of the call, the governance structure is what basically makes an organization thrive long term.
Thank you very much. And I think it's that bottom up thing that's happening that is such a big risk, is that it's leadership teams aren't really aware of what's going on, which is leading to a lack of governance in the area. And I think it's just much higher than it ever has been before in agencies, and obviously lots of businesses, but we're talking about agencies specifically here, and it's just happening so quickly. So it's something that I really want to highlight on this call, that people who are in senior leader roles in agencies, like, you need to be looking at this and taking it seriously, because it's a big issue. Okay, and from that, so our next thing is to talk about responsibility. So who actually owns AI risk? So one of the biggest patterns I'm seeing is that AI is being used everywhere, but the responsibility hasn't really been defined properly. So tools are being used, work is being influenced, but no one has formally decided who approves the tools, who sets the rules with it, who checks compliance, or who is accountable if something goes wrong. And that means that responsibility becomes assumed. So back over to you, Vidya. So you often say ethical AI isn't a theory problem, it's a practice problem. When organizations don't define responsibility for AI, what actually happens internally?
So there's three words that get used a lot, and they get confused. So ethical AI, responsible AI, and accountable AI. So ethical AI is basically your North Star, your values of your organization. Are we using AI in an appropriate way that is aligned with our own values? That's ethical AI. Responsible AI is the governance. So we are demonstrating that we have put the appropriate framework in place to understand how the teams are using AI tools, whether they're internally built tools, whether they're workflows, whether it's generative AI and producing outputs. That's responsible by demonstrating that you've gone through a process and you've documented all of your thought processes, and policies, internal policies, clients, contracts have been reviewed and updated with an AI lens. And then trustworthy AI, that's all about accountability. So you're demonstrating that you are accountable, but you've also got to, one of the reasons with the AI governance is so important is that you then go through the process of actually working out who is accountable, because an organization would need to work out, is it an individual that's accountable if something goes wrong? Is it the organization? Is if you've got a workflow and you have multiple third-party organizations, what happens if one of those organizations within the workflow goes down? So it's literally looking at it piece by piece by piece. So to answer the question, who is ultimately responsible, it's a very difficult question to answer without going through a process and documenting it and bringing all of the appropriate actors in place. So a term that we're hearing more and more is AI supply chain. So understanding where you are within the AI supply chain. So if I use language from the EU AI Act, the EU AI Act basically is European legislation that basically demonstrates how you should be compliant with AI. It does focus on high risk AI systems, but there's a lot of good information that's publicly available via the Act. But the provider is the organization that builds the AI tool, and the deployer, which is what the vast majority of agencies are likely to be. They're the deployers are the organizations that use the tool. So the vast majority of agencies are going to be deployers, and there are some very clear obligations, one of them being AI literacy. And AI literacy is all about ensuring that your staff know how to use the tool appropriately. There are consistencies within the organization. There's no assumptions being made. And the challenge that you have with shadow AI, where you have a number of different tools being used in different manners, it's really problematic because almost anything could go wrong because there's no oversight or accountability. And oversight is actually one of the key points of AI governance.
Thank you very much. And I think that I don't know if you know on the call, but obviously the EU AI Act is being kind of, I don't know the exact term, but kind of rolled out. There's new regulations being rolled out in August. That's right, isn't it, Vidya? So it's something that everyone needs to be aware of, obviously depending on where you work and where you operate, but those are likely to impact much wider. And obviously when you're looking at working with multiple clients or doing proposals, it's likely this will be influencing the way that agencies operate, and the guidance will be influencing other regulations as well. So it's something that everyone within this world needs to take seriously. Okay, so over to you, Rohit. In practice, when teams are experimenting with AI tools, they often assume the responsibility sits with the tool provider. But if something goes wrong, especially involving client data, where does accountability actually lie? You're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So ultimately, it lies with the business. The tool provider, obviously, there's certain things that they are being brought up on with the way that their tools are being used and being able to use. But in terms of client data and being used and being put into free versions of tools and being used incorrectly, it is sitting with the owners and so that still applies to the regular rules around data protection as well. So all the ICO rules, GDPR, and I think just in the AI world, it means that a breach is easier to be found, and because there's so many people using these tools, and so there's a higher risk of getting those fines. I think what some of the fines are 17 million, 4% of annual worldwide turnover as the maximum, and then standard ones are still big even for small agencies anyway, 8.7 million. So there's a significant risk of using the wrong tools and putting data where it shouldn't be, even if it's by accident. But I mean, there's so much more in terms of regulations that are still coming out. So in professional services, so the Financial Conduct Authority, they are releasing rules around the use of AI. So even if an agency has a client which is in the financial services, that financial services company still needs to know how AI has come to their content, if that's what's going on. So there's still a lot going on and being built, because so much is still unknown. So it's very much making sure that you've got the governance right and that you know exactly where your data is going, what you're using AI for, and be able to interpret how it came to either that decision or how it came to that content.
And I think where agencies have got a huge responsibility is by not making assumptions that people will know these things, will know how to use data. Like agencies or any business needs to be really clear with their team about how data and all parts can be input. And that's where there's a really big gap at the moment, is people aren't telling and training teams on how to use these tools.
Well, I mean, GDPR and all the data protection rules have been, as Michael was saying, they've been out for over a decade, and people still struggle with how they work with it and how they manage it. So now we add an extra tool, which is even faster to be able to break those rules. It is making sure, everyone understands how to use the data, what they can post, what they can use within whichever tool that they're using, and how to lock down those tools as well.
And so the agency has to make decisions on that, which is, I think, what is being put off at the moment. The agency hasn't got the capacity to think through all the steps of like where they do want to use the data, which tools they do want to use, and therefore there ends up being a big gap with letting their team know, and then a huge amount of assumptions are made that the team might know how to use data, they might not, but obviously it's those assumptions are causing a big risk for agencies at the moment. Okay, so over to you, Michael. From an agency leadership perspective, how should founders think about ownership here? Is this an ops responsibility, a tech responsibility, or ultimately a leadership responsibility?
Yeah, I think without a shadow of a doubt, to my mind, it's a leadership responsibility. I think, the operations team can go and document things once somebody's decided it needs to be documented. IT is going to play an important role. Sure, they're going to assess tools and maybe make up a safe list versus a no-go list, for sure. But at the end of the day, everyone's reporting into leadership, and leadership needs to decide. I think once leadership gets the gravity of the importance of this, they'll make a decision, and then everyone's got to play ball. And I mean, just to bring this really practically, and we've been talking around GDPR a little bit, practical example. I'm an agency owner. I gear up a little bit over this 3 or 6 month period of the year because it gets super busy, and I obviously, to manage my resources, I bring some freelancers in, and freelancers using free ChatGPT. Now, the consumer terms of ChatGPT versus a enterprise version of ChatGPT are very different, and the UK GDPR is very clear. Agencies are, in the course of normal work, are the data controllers, and as a data controller, if your freelancer who's working for your business is dropping certain information into ChatGPT, they could have committed 3 GDPR breaches in one prompt. So at the end of the day, I think ultimately it's got to be leadership. You've got to own it. A lot of the friction that I see happening in businesses that are trying to enable their businesses to become more AI forward and really infuse it into their business, the friction is people. As leaders, we also have to manage the narrative, because I think there's a lot of fear that, okay, if we bring AI into the agency formally, does that mean I'm out of a job? So there's all those kind of things that as leaders, we need to manage narrative and manage processes. So yeah, to my mind, honestly, it's a leadership job to be done here.
Okay, thank you. And I think from my understanding with clients that I've worked with, a big problem is that it's not actually the leaders that are at the forefront of kind of adopting and implementing AI, and that's causing some barriers with them taking the lead on it, to be honest. So, they don't feel like they have a good understanding of it. They don't feel like it's a decision they've made to kind of implement. And I think that's what's causing some big barriers. But as you said, of course it's with leaders, and it's something that leaders can't ignore and just say they don't understand or they don't know about. Like it's something that
Yeah, and I can
really has to
empathize
take-
because there's so much hype out there. There's so much noise. Any whether it's the news, whether it's your LinkedIn feed, everyone's got the next AI wow fizz bang pop, right? It's just crazy. And it's about sort of getting into the right circles where people are talking about this as business owners, not as somebody trying to sell a tool, because everyone's trying to sell a tool, sell a hack. I think the opportunity of getting the right kind of structure in place in your business now can really unleash this technology massively. The wow is not, ooh, I can get this report done in 15 minutes as opposed to 3 hours. That's nice, but that's a level one thinking. The level one is I'm using a chatbot as a thinking partner. Great, lower risk, but lower reward. The rewards are when you start to institutionalize the AI. And I mean, we're not going to have, I mean, Rohit could probably get into some beautifully technical detail here just in terms of the databases and what one can do with it. But really, I'd encourage leaders to, yeah, just you're going to have to just put your parapets on and just, you know, take some of the hype and let it bubble off. In amongst all the noise, there are people out there that really get the operational opportunities with this technology, and it does not sit in a chatbot prompt, I promise.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great way of putting it. Thank you. Okay. So we're just going to move on to talking about guardrails without bureaucracy. So one concern I hear a lot from founders is if we introduce governance, are we just going to slow everything down? And obviously for agency founders, this is a huge concern because agency founders like to be dynamic, they like to move quickly. So the idea of governance isn't so appealing. So the answer is it depends how you do it, because good governance shouldn't feel like bureaucracy. It should feel like more clarity within your business, and particularly around the area of AI. For me, it's quite frightening that people don't know what's going on inside their businesses. So to take this seriously and to look at the governance will allow you, the senior leaders and people running the organization, to understand how you're delivering your business, which should be something that you do understand. And I don't know why we've kind of moved away from that in the last couple of years, which we have. So we need to get back to kind of where we were with that. So to Rohit, from a practical standpoint, what are the first guardrails every agency should put in place?
So I sort of get the point of the governance. Obviously, I'm from a financial services background, and whenever we talked about compliance, it was, do we have to? But in terms of guardrails for AI, it's making sure that when we're looking at like processes and tools, we know exactly what's going in. So we know that, okay, this type of data is going to be used for this process. Where does that then live? Where do we store it? It's like any sort of data process. It's making sure that we've got an understanding of where that is in terms of the whole scope of what data we're using. And then the sort of the rules that you set around that are based on the risk of that data not being in the right place. So if you're using client emails, client contact details, you know, you can use those in like your email campaigns, but make sure that's only uploaded to wherever you're using it. Make sure that if you know you're sending out emails, you have those unsubscribe options and everything in place so that you're still following all those rules. And it essentially just becomes a bit of a checklist for each of your processes that you can follow to say, right, what are we doing? And I think one of the most important guardrails of all is a human. You have to, especially if you're producing content or something that is going to go out, it has to have a human looking at it. One of the biggest one thing that I saw in the US is a lawyer got fined because they had a whole load of citations for their law case. It was a clash action worth, I think, around $4 billion, and they used ChatGPT to add it all together. Now they used a business version, so that data didn't go anywhere else. But as many of you know, models can hallucinate. So it ended up hallucinating citations for this case. And because of that mistake, the whole class action got thrown out, and then they got fined as well. So it's made, but if a human had actually properly reviewed, they would be like, okay, no, this isn't right. But then also putting in other verification steps within your AI process to make sure that, right, what have I got here? Does that actually show as reality rather than just one prompt, it's done, and send it out?
And I think that's a really good point. I mean, also knowing where you want your agency to use AI versus a human, you know, what parts of each output or process are done by who, and that's really clearly defined is really important. I had a potential client for my operations side, and they were kind of questioning me on that they didn't want to do anything with AI. So they said, we as an agency don't want to do anything with AI. I'm not going to change their view on that, even though I disagree, but that's what they want to do. But actually, that's not kind of the right thinking on it. Is think that, like, the thinking is what is important. Why have you taken that standpoint? And in this case, it's because they position themselves to clients to say all our content is written by skilled copywriters. You can still do that, but you can use AI for the things for other parts of your business that are important. But it's having those guardrails in place about what you should be protecting, but also what you want to protect as an agency, whether it's part of your brand that something is done in a certain way. That's great, you can keep doing that, but it's putting the guardrails in place in terms of defining where you would like to use AI and where you do, and rolling that out across your agency. So Vidya, you say that governance should already exist in organizations through normal operational thinking. How can agencies apply the same logic they use for hiring people or approving suppliers to AI tools?
So a well operating agency should already have processes in place, standard operating procedures, policies. Earlier, Michael gave the example about what happens if a freelancer uses ChatGPT or any generative AI for client work. Well, add a clause to the contract. So it's as simple as looking at all of your existing policies and processes, but this time with an AI lens. And it's really important to do that up front, because if you don't do it and you're not proactive, you're going to be reactive. Because going back to the point about supply chain, one of your suppliers or contractors or could come back to you with one of their contracts, and they may change the clause that may be appealing or not appealing. So it's best to be on the front foot there. So if you don't have the policies in place, that is a very tricky situation, because you need to have policies in place. Unless you're, a one-person outfit, you may not have things in place, but you really should be thinking about things. So a larger established organization that is employing people, just look at exactly what you already have. A way to start is to have an AI inventory. So an AI inventory is basically looking at what tools are being used within your organization, why they're being used, in what capacity, which clients are using them, which members of staff are using them, what is the expected output. And that's going to give you a whole load of data to where to go next. So that's a first point. But I would hope that the agencies already have things in place.
Okay, thank you.
On one other thing, the thing is, be lawful. So when you are when you're running an organization, you need to be lawful. Just because AI has now come in, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be lawful. So just ensure that where you're using AI, is the output or the process you're using still lawful.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of agencies having those processes, I mean, I think it's very much across all businesses, but agencies specifically in this case. And I think with AI, it's even less so. And what I do, for example, with my clients is we start with an audit. So with my like AI consulting clients, we start with an audit, and the results nearly always surprise the leaders in terms of what's being used. And obviously it gives some good points of why, and it's often like a way wider tech stack than anyone within the agency thought existed, which is I'm sure happening across a lot of agencies. So over to you, Michael, from a founder's perspective, how do you introduce structure without making teams feel restricted? And how do you position governance as something that actually enables better work?
Right, sorry. Okay, I'm off mute. Yeah, I think agencies present a very interesting dynamic here. I think, if you had to compare an agency space to a legal firm or a financial services firm, those other firms are full of people that are very used to and kind of like the idea of rules and regulations. That's why they're in financial services and legal firms. Agencies, on the other hand, I remember chatting to one of my colleagues, my senior leaders in the business, and working with the creatives was like herding cats. It's a real delicate thing to do. You've got artistic people that value their autonomy massively, and they're actually kind of misfits in a way. They're all about anti-establishment. That's why they're creative artists. So I think the balance here is going to be very, very tricky to nail. And I think one of the key things is going to be using in-house experiences. And I think for any agency person on the call right now will relate to this. We know that horrible scenario where you've got a very muddled brief that's come from clients. They're not sure what the hell they want, but they got some money and they just need you to sort this problem out that they haven't figured out, but they want you to sort it out. Now you take that brief and you drop it into the creative studio, it's carnage, right? Nobody knows what the real problem is. The creative is sloppy. It's not really hitting a point. It's iffy, right? So I like to use that as an analogy here. And I think if, as leaders, when we're talking around AI and these operational governance things we're going to start to bake into the business from that perspective, is to say, right, client gives us a really bad brief. How many guardrails have we got? We've got none. Very little. That's why it's such a painful job to do. But if we approach it from that perspective, say, right, guys, there's AI opportunities here. Everyone's playing around. It's all cool and that. But inside, I know you're concerned about your job. You're concerned about what it means to the longevity of the business, those kind of things. And if you start approaching it from that perspective, which is very transparent, people start to feel, hey, you're actually talking about what I'm living and seeing. Now we can start to talk. So I think there's the narrative component. The other component is, and I covered this off in chapter 8 of the book, change management teaches us. There's a lot of failed change management case studies out there. And 9 times out of 10, what happens is consultants come in with this big bang approach. It's like, right, this is what it should look like. And you go, dude, I do not have the opportunity to switch off my business for 6 months, go and build out this thing that looks beautiful and it fits the textbook, and then switch my business back on and then carry on. I've got to make it work now. I've got a pitch coming up next week, and I know there's going to be AI questions. How do I get ready? And I think the way I've approached it in chapter 8 of the book is about taking those learnings and saying, right, let's look at those existing workflows, and they are going to be loose. I mean, it depends, right? If you're a 5-person agency versus 50, there's a continuum of structure. But anybody that's worked in a corporate banking environment, if you walked into any agency on average, you're going to go, how do these oaks make money? Right? Because it's fast and loose compared to something as structured as a financial services business. So you don't want to alienate your creative team here. You've got to appreciate what your existing processes are and say, how do I start knitting it in? So, for example, the one thing that I published a couple of months ago, I talk about the data traffic light. A nice little poster you can stick up on everyone's screen saying, right, before you dump anything into an AI chatbot, red Don't even think about it. Amber, okay, you can. Why? Because the technical guys have given us a sandbox where we're allowed to play. It's allowed to go in there. Green, okay, it's public information. I'm just doing public sentiment about something for my research. That's green, good to go. So it's going to be simple things like that, like the data traffic lights, that people are going to go, I get it, because it's 1, 2, 3 lots. When you start dumping a 47-page policy on people, they're going to go, what? And they're going to try for a day, and then they're just going to improvise and do what they can do. So we've got to keep it real simple, and we've got to focus on what are the existing processes. We don't have the luxury of switching off businesses and switching them on to go and re-engineer them. We've got to engineer them on the move.
Thank you. And I think, like you mentioned about creative teams, it's really important for someone in the business to own it and to really understand it as well. So how can you actually make this apply to the people within your team so that it sticks? So like you said, if you just give everyone this kind of AI policy, like this is what you do, no one's going to do anything. So you need to make sure that you are giving the people that in each team the information that they need that applies to them. They'll be using different tools. They'll be using AI in different ways. So you need to thought through those processes and give them the guidance on where that's right, like what they need to be careful of, where they might need to report something and say that there's a risk. And if you can make it relevant for each team and each process, that's where it will really work. Okay, we'll move into the last theme. So we'll just try and cover this one quickly. So what I want to talk about, which is what agencies probably want most interested in. So I want to talk about not only kind of risk and governance and what needs to be put in place, but also how agencies can turn this into a competitive advantage. So this should be seen as an opportunity for agencies as well as something that they need to put in place due to what's going on in the environment around us. So clients are going to start asking more questions about AI, and some agencies will struggle to answer them and others will be able to answer them very clearly, and that gap becomes very important. So back over to you, Michael. Do you see responsible AI becoming a commercial differentiator?
Yeah, I think it's going to become table stakes, to be fair. So projecting out 24 months, it's table stakes. Right now, the agency owners that move quickly, get their ducks in a row quickly, are going to be the ones that when they're sitting there in that RFP process, submitting their pitch, that they're ready. And we know the senior agency leaders on the call will know that, yes, there's that formal RFP process, but there's a lot of conversation going off the ball, right? So your team's done the pitch, everyone's sort of getting off the buzz of the pitch, and it'll be while you're walking down the hall as the CSD or the MD and the head of procurement or maybe the COO is having a chat and just says, oh, as a matter of interest, how's your team using AI? And if you start blowing a few bubbles there, they're already going to go, oh, okay, risk. Okay, they put like a little yellow mark next to your name. Versus the scenario where you say, yeah, no, 100%, I can take you through that. I've got, bust open their laptop, takes them through 1 or 2 slides showing here, these are the tools we use. This is where we use them in the different processes. This is how we manage the data. And so I think in the short term, the commercial opportunity is you're going to get through more pitches than your competitors. That's the short-term version. The longer-term commercial advantage and differentiator is what excites me the most, quite honestly, because I think there's a lot of businesses that have been built through years of very, very deep institutional knowledge. And what happens is a lot of that institutional knowledge is not captured. What happens is it sits in 2 or 3 people, somebody retires, someone has a baby, decides, yeah, I'm not coming back to work. Anything can happen, right? And the opportunity AI gives us, if we do this job properly as business owners, is when we break down our business processes into the most minute of detail, and we understand which books have influenced us, what copywriting frameworks we've synthesized together that have helped produce a unique flavor in our agency. If you go and codify all of that, it starts to bake into your business a brand differentiator, because right now laziness prevails. Everyone goes to ChatGPT or Claude and says, write me a campaign for blah, blah, blah. Oof. And, you know, to the untrained eye, hey, looks okay. I'll take it. But somebody that's got a very meticulous, skilled eye, that's been looking at graphic design for a long time, that's been reading copywriting for 10 years, they're going to be able to tell the difference between good or bad. Now, you're not going to get that right with prompting alone. I promise you, it's way beyond prompting. It's about engineering your business in such a way to say, where am I capturing value? And what unique value am I going to capture because I've got the process down? The difference is not a prompt, it's a process.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to touch on one very quickly to you, Rohit, about price. But I think, to be honest, it's a whole webinar on its own talking about pricing. So if an agency is now delivering work faster using AI, how should they think about pricing?
So, I mean, this pricing issue sort of across lots of different industries where, you know, oh, if you can do it in an hour, then it shouldn't cost you that much. But it's when you're using AI in the right way, you're using all of your experience. So it's just like any other tool that you're using to produce your content, or, you know, you'll still use. So if you've got writers, they've got that 10 years of copywriting experience that someone is still paying for. So the way that I work in terms of the things that we produce, you know, we can produce things quickly, but it's our experience. And so we are focused on the outcome rather than the number of hours that it takes us to do things, because it's delivering a specific amount of value to that client. Just because we're using AI doesn't make that output any less, as long as you're actually producing good work. If you're using AI in a very, very poor way and it's producing very, very generic content, then it's not valuable enough to still reap the rewards of that amount that you're charging your clients. But if you're using AI as part of the process and that process becomes a shorter time frame, you're still able to deliver that value and even increase the value. And so you can take on more clients. Otherwise, you're at a point where you reduce your hourly rate and you have to take on even more people and more clients for the same pie, essentially. So for me, I would focus on an outcome-based way. There are ways that, you know, you could use performance stats as well as a pricing model, so that their clients can be assured that what you're producing is still high quality. But then again, that's still very subjective between the industries that you'll probably be working in. So it just depends on what those industries are. But I would always say outcome focus is the fairest approach.
Thank you. And that's a huge topic for agencies, but it's something to think of in line with competitiveness, like how you use AI, obviously, now is how competitive we all are. So I just want to finish with a question kind of that I was going to ask the panel, but we've run out of time. So just to leave you all with is to think about what you're using AI for now that feels totally normal, that you think in a couple of years you'll think, what the heck will we be doing with that? So things like team members dumping a load of data into ChatGPT. Actually now it's not seen as that bad, or it's quite common across agencies, but in 2 years time we'll think, what the heck were we doing letting everyone just run wild with a load of tools? So it's just something to leave you with. A few takeaways are that shadow AI is incredibly common and it's really understandable, but responsibility shouldn't stay informal, and governance, when it's done well, doesn't need to slow agencies down either. It actually enables scale more quickly. And the most important point is the agencies that win here won't be the fastest to adopt AI, they'll be the ones that clients trust the most. And just to let you know that I actually obviously work with the agencies on this, and I'm looking at, I have like an operating model that I use, which covers a lot of these subjects. So it's doing an audit with your companies, looking at where the responsibility is and looking at how to roll it out moving forward. So if anyone's interested in this issue specifically, please do drop me a message and we can talk about how I can help with this. Thank you so much to my panelists, and thank you to everyone who came and watched today. It's been a great conversation. Andy, you can send any questions to me and I'll share them with the panel, or I can answer them if relevant, and then I'll share anything interesting with the wider team here as well. Nice to see you all. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.